Toxic sister and overbearing mother. Tried to ruin my wedding, convinced my friend to flirt with my fiancé. I chose a new family, and now they want reconciliation. It was a sweltering summer evening, and the air was thick with tension and humidity. The entire town had gathered at the annual 4th of July fireworks display, a beloved tradition where families and friends came together to celebrate. For many, it was an evening of joy and festivity, but for me, it was about to become a nightmare that would haunt me for years. As the fireworks burst into vibrant colors overhead, casting a surreal glow on the faces of onlookers, I found myself nervously standing at the edge of the park. My sister's best friend, Alex, whom I had been dating for nearly 2 years, had insisted on taking me to a secluded spot away from the crowd. I thought it was strange, but I went along, assuming he wanted a private moment amidst the chaos. When we reached the clearing near the riverbank, Alex turned to face me. His expression was serious, and before I could ask what was on his mind, he suddenly dropped to one knee. My heart skipped a beat as he pulled out a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. In the dim light, I could see the outline of a diamond ring sparkling inside. "Marry me," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. My breath caught in my throat. I was only 17, freshly graduated from high school, with dreams of college and a career still ahead of me. The thought of marriage had never even crossed my mind, let alone marrying Alex. The weight of the moment was suffocating, and I felt a rush of panic rising within me. "Alex, I can't," I stammered, taking a step back. "I'm not ready for this. We're too young. I have so much I want to do before even thinking about marriage." His face fell, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something dark in his eyes. But before I could process it, the look was gone, replaced by a pained smile. "We can wait," he pleaded, rising to his feet. "We don't have to get married right away. We can have a long engagement. I just want to know that you'll be mine forever." But the more he spoke, the more my anxiety grew. I felt trapped, as if the walls were closing in around me. I took another step back, shaking my head. "I'm sorry, Alex. I care about you, but I can't do this. I'm not ready to make that kind of commitment." A silence fell between us, broken only by the distant crackle of fireworks. For a moment, it seemed like Alex would accept my answer. But then his demeanor changed. His face twisted into an expression of anger and hurt, and before I knew it, he grabbed my arm tightly, his grip almost bruising. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "Do you know how much I've given up for you? How much I've sacrificed? You're going to throw all that away?" Fear surged through me as I tried to pull my arm free, but his grip only tightened. "Let go of me, Alex," I demanded, my voice shaking. He ignored my plea, pulling me closer, his eyes wild with desperation. "You're not leaving me," he whispered fiercely. "We belong together. You don't get to just walk away." Terrified, I did the only thing I could think of. I stomped on his foot as hard as I could. He let out a yelp of pain and released me just enough for me to break free. Without looking back, I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest, tears streaming down my face. I could hear him calling after me, his voice frantic, but I didn't stop until I reached the safety of the crowd. Shaken and breathless, I found my sister and tried to explain what had happened, but she dismissed it as a misunderstanding, blaming the heat of the moment and the overwhelming excitement of the proposal. No one took my fear seriously, not even my own family, who thought I was overreacting to a simple proposal gone wrong. But deep down, I knew something had changed between Alex and me. The man I had once cared for had shown a side of himself that I couldn't ignore, a side that was possessive, controlling, and dangerous. And as the fireworks exploded overhead, painting the sky in brilliant colors, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far more sinister. Just after graduation, he proposed, but I turned him down. This decision led to significant turmoil within my family. My parents pleaded with me to reconsider, suggesting we could have a long engagement or even make a promise to repair the relationship between my sister and me. My bond with my brother, who was 34 at the time, suffered, but the one with my younger sister, who was 30, never recovered. She was convinced that my ex was the perfect match for me. The situation became unbearable when she started dating my ex's cousin. My ex was frequently invited by my siblings to various events, including some family holidays. I didn't say anything initially since he was their friend too, but then my sister began pushing for us to get back together. She tried everything from setting us up on blind dates to insisting we share rooms during family vacations. No matter the occasion, my ex was always invited. After enduring this for a long time, I reached my limit and asked my parents to step in. They spoke to my siblings, making it clear that my ex shouldn't be invited so frequently. Things improved slightly, but while my brother backed off, my sister didn't. The situation reached a boiling point when I met my now husband during a semester abroad. He was from another university, but we clicked immediately. It was a magical time, and after dating for a little over a year, we got engaged. My family was thrilled, except for my sister, who kept insisting that I was just in the honeymoon phase and would eventually come to my senses. But I didn't, and after countless arguments and her relentless attempts to reunite me with my ex, I finally told her that if she pulled anything again, I would cut off all contact with her. It was the middle of autumn when everything changed. The leaves had just started turning brilliant shades of orange and red, and the air had that crisp, fresh scent of the season. I had been doing my best to move on with my life after the unsettling encounter with Alex during the summer. Things had been relatively quiet, and I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could put that nightmare behind me. But that peace was shattered one night, in a way I never could have anticipated. It had been a long day at college, and I was exhausted. My classes were demanding, and I had spent hours at the library studying for an upcoming exam. By the time I finally got back to my dorm room, all I wanted was a hot shower to wash away the stress of the day. My roommate Emily had gone out for the evening, so I had the place to myself, a rare luxury that I planned to fully enjoy. I turned on the shower, letting the steam fill the tiny bathroom, and undressed, eager to let the hot water relax my tense muscles. I stepped into the shower, feeling the warm water cascade over me, washing away the remnants of the day. For a moment, I allowed myself to relax, closing my eyes and letting the soothing sensation take over. It felt like the first time in weeks that I could truly breathe. But that brief moment of peace was abruptly shattered. As I stood under the water, I heard a faint noise. At first I thought it was just the building settling or perhaps Emily coming back early. But then I realized the sound was too close, too deliberate. It was the creak of a floorboard, coming from right outside the bathroom door. My heart began to race. I quickly turned off the shower, standing still in the silence that followed, trying to listen for any other sounds. The only thing I could hear was the rapid beating of my heart and the dripping of water from my hair onto the tiled floor. I told myself that it was probably nothing, that I was just being paranoid after everything that had happened with Alex. But then, the bathroom door creaked open. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. The bathroom was small and there was nowhere to hide. I felt utterly exposed, standing there naked and vulnerable. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Who could it be? Emily? A maintenance worker? But why would they come in without knocking? As the door slowly swung open, I saw a shadowy figure in the dim light of the room. The steam from the shower was still thick in the air, making it hard to see clearly. I backed up against the cold tile wall, my breath hitching in my throat. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady, but it came out shaky and uncertain. The figure stepped into the light and my blood ran cold. It was Alex. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was as though my worst nightmare had come to life. He shouldn't have been anywhere near me. He wasn't supposed to know where I lived, let alone have access to my dorm room. But there he was, standing in the doorway, his eyes locked on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Alex? What are you doing here?" My voice trembled, betraying the fear I felt. I crossed my arms over my chest, trying to cover myself as best I could, feeling the cold air prickle against my wet skin. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he just stood there, staring at me with that same dark, possessive look I had seen that night at the fireworks. There was something unhinged in his eyes, something that made every instinct in my body scream for me to run. But there was nowhere to go. I was trapped. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" he finally said, his voice eerily calm, as if this were just a normal conversation and not an invasion of my privacy. I blocked your number," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, you shouldn't be here. You need to leave." He shook his head slowly, as if disappointed. "I tried to be patient. I thought you just needed time to come around. But then I heard you were seeing someone else." His voice took on a sharp edge. "How could you do that to me?" His words hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't told anyone about the guy I'd started seeing recently. We'd only been on a few dates, but I had been careful to keep it quiet, not wanting to stir up any more drama. How did Alex even know? How did you find me?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. He smiled, a cold, calculated expression that made my blood run cold. "I have my ways," he said cryptically. "You can't just walk away from me like I'm nothing. We're meant to be together, don't you see that? We're supposed to be together forever." A wave of terror washed over me. His words, his demeanor, it all screamed danger. I had to get out of there, but how? I was trapped in a small enclosed space with no weapon, no way to defend myself. Alex, please, you need to leave, I pleaded, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't right. You're scaring me. His smile faltered, and his expression darkened. I didn't want it to be this way, he said softly, almost regretfully. But you forced my hand. Before I could react, he lunged at me, grabbing my wrist with a force that made me cry out in pain. I struggled, trying to pull away, but his grip was like iron. Panic surged through me as I realized how much stronger he was. He dragged me out of the shower, water splashing onto the floor as I fought against him, slipping and sliding on the wet tiles. Let me go! I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the rush of blood in my ears and the sound of my own panicked breathing. He didn't let go. Instead, he pulled me closer, his breath hot against my ear as he whispered, "You're mine, and I'll never let you go." Desperation fueled my actions as I clawed at his hand, trying to break free. In a last-ditch effort, I grabbed the shower curtain and yanked it down, hoping to use it as a barrier between us. The curtain rod clattered to the floor, creating a momentary distraction. I seized the opportunity, twisting out of his grasp and scrambling toward the door, but I slipped on the wet floor, crashing to the ground with a painful thud. The impact knocked the wind out of me, leaving me gasping for breath. Before I could recover, Alex was on me again, pinning me down with a terrifying strength. "Stop fighting!" he hissed, his eyes wild with obsession. "You're only making this harder for yourself." I knew I had to do something, anything to get away from him. Summoning every ounce of strength I had left, I brought my knee up as hard as I could, aiming for his groin. He let out a grunt of pain and loosened his grip just enough for me to wriggle free. I bolted for the door, adrenaline surging through my veins. My only thought was to get out, to find help. I burst out of the bathroom, still dripping wet and completely naked, and ran down the hallway of my dorm, screaming for help. Doors flew open as my neighbors rushed out to see what was happening. I didn't stop running until I was outside, the cold night air biting into my wet skin. Someone wrapped a blanket around me, and I collapsed onto the ground, trembling uncontrollably, tears streaming down my face. By the time campus security arrived, Alex was gone. They searched the dorm and surrounding area, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. But I knew better. He wasn't gone. He was out there, somewhere, waiting for another opportunity. As I sat there shivering under the blanket, surrounded by concerned faces, I realized that my life would never be the same. The fear that gripped me in that moment would haunt me forever. Alex wasn't just a memory or a bad experience. He was a threat, one that wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. Despite this warning, my sister went ahead and made me her maid of honor when she got married. She insisted that I spend all my time with the bridal party, which included my ex. She even arranged for one of her friends to be my husband's date at the reception. We didn't realize what was happening until we were at the reception, and her friend made a pass at my husband. My sister justified her actions by claiming that since we weren't married yet, it was okay to explore other options. I was furious and left the party. The next day, I spoke with my parents and brother, explaining that while I wouldn't force them to choose sides, I was done with my sister. I also warned that if they tried to fix things between us, I would cut them off too. My mom was devastated and tried to negotiate, but my dad and brother respected my decision. Apart from a couple of attempts by my mom, I haven't spoken to my sister in over 8 years. She has tried everything to reconcile with me, from sending gifts to throwing tantrums, but I refuse to engage with her. When we're at family events, I act as if she doesn't exist. Initially, she made snarky remarks and tried to create drama, but since no one backed her up, she eventually gave up. She did have a meltdown when she found out that she was invited to my wedding but wasn't involved in any of the preparations. My brother has expressed guilt for going along with things for so long, and his relationship with my ex has deteriorated as a result. They still speak, but they're not as close as they used to be. Recently, at my mom's birthday party, I announced that we were expecting our first child. While this wasn't the first grandchild, it was the first granddaughter, and everyone was thrilled except for my sister. My mom noticed her lack of enthusiasm and invited me for tea a few days later. I had a bad feeling about it, but decided to stay positive. When I arrived, I saw my sister's car outside. As soon as I walked in, there was my sister, her husband, my ex, and my ex's mother. They had planned an intervention. My ex claimed he was just trying to be romantic, and that he understood I couldn't appreciate it. His mother said I was hurting my sister, who only wanted what was best for me, and that she had already apologized, so I needed to forgive her. I sat there in disbelief, texting my husband, father, and brother while my mother began reading a letter about how hurt she was that her daughters weren't close. She acknowledged that my sister was wrong, but insisted that her intentions were good. Then my sister read her own letter, crying and repeating the same points as everyone else. I didn't say a word until my brother arrived, and he was angrier than I'd ever seen him. He grabbed my things and told everyone he was disappointed and disgusted by their actions. We sat in his car until my dad and husband arrived. By that time, I was sobbing, and my brother kept apologizing. I'm not sure what happened after we left, but I sent an email to everyone except my mom with my lawyer's contact information, stating that I didn't want any of them to contact me again, and if they did, I would involve the police. No one has reached out to me since, but my dad told me that my mom and sister are hysterical. They had hoped to fix things and wanted my sister to be part of my child's life, possibly even as the godmother. My dad is currently staying with my brother, and they both support my decision. However, some other family members don't. I've even had mutual friends call me, concerned about my sister's well-being, and asking what happened since she's now spreading the narrative that my husband is keeping me away from my family. I hate having my business out in the open, but I made a public Facebook post detailing everything that happened. My sister, her husband, and my ex are being dragged through the mud, which wasn't my intention, but I can't say I feel bad about it. My mom has been inconsolable, which makes me feel guilty, but not as guilty as she made me feel during that so-called intervention. I agreed to talk to my mom a few days ago and set ground rules for any future interactions, including family therapy, clear boundaries, no sharing information about me with my sister, and separate holidays. Most importantly, I made it clear that if she ever tried anything like this again, I would cut her off for good. She thinks these conditions are too strict but is willing to agree. She thought that meant she'd immediately have access to baby news, and that everything was resolved. But I told her this is a process, and that she needs to prove she has changed. My dad and brother refuse to speak to my sister, and keep apologizing for not stopping things earlier. I've forgiven them since they've been able to move on and grow. My husband supports whatever I decide, but my mother-in-law is unsure if cutting my mom off from her granddaughter is the right move, though she says it's ultimately my decision. I'm torn about what to do with my mom. Commenters on my post have asked me things like, "Do they really think now that you're pregnant, you should stop pretending to be happy with your husband and realize your ex is your true love? What about your baby? Will your ex and his family accept her?" My sister claims she's not trying to reunite me with my ex anymore, but says I can't take away her chance to be an aunt. She says I'm a bad sister for being close with my sisters-in-law, who are amazing people. Obviously, I don't believe her. My main issue is what to do about my mom. One commenter asked, "Couldn't she be your best friend without you dating your ex?" I wish I knew what her thought process was. My husband thinks she's just mentally unwell. The scariest thing is that my ex still has the mixtapes and CDs I made for him when we were dating. Those things are over 25 years old, and he still holds on to them. Another commenter was surprised that my stalker ex, yes, I'll call him that, is still in my brother's life. They advised me to stand firm with my mother and not set any timelines for her to prove she can stick to my rules. My sister needs to live with the consequences of her actions. To be fair to my brother, he did start to distance himself from my ex when I told my parents I was uncomfortable with him being around all the time. I was living away for college but would visit during breaks. My brother also made a significant effort to make my husband feel welcome, which further strained his relationship with my ex because he felt betrayed. Nowadays, my husband is one of my brother's closest friends, and they only speak to my ex when it's about my nephew or to avoid being rude. I'm not from a religious family, and my parents were generally good people. They initially thought it was romantic when my ex kept trying to win me back, but eventually realized it wasn't. They encouraged me to go to college and supported me in most things. Now I know that my dad actually supported me, while my mom may have just been going along with it, sharing the same beliefs as my sister. My sister had this fantasy that we would be best friends married to cousins. My ex and I broke up when I was 19. He is now 39. The reason for our breakup was that I didn't want to get married or engaged at that time. My sister's insistence on us being together comes from her obsession with the idea of us being best friends and marrying cousins. My mom has always been kind to my husband, but I'm starting to believe it was all an act, which makes me very sad. My ex has been in relationships since we broke up, and he even has 2 children with another woman, but he's never been married. My sister thinks it's romantic that he only ever wanted to marry me. I should also mention that his obsessive behavior isn't limited to me. I've heard from others that he was just as intense with the mother of his children. He's now refocusing on me because my sister is encouraging it as part of her plan to get back into my good graces so she can be a good aunt. My brother did start to distance himself from my ex when I told my parents I was uncomfortable with him being around all the time. I was living away for college but would visit during breaks. He also made a significant effort to make my husband feel welcome, which deteriorated his relationship with my ex even more because he felt betrayed by my brother. Nowadays, my husband is one of my brother's closest friends, and they only speak with my ex when it's about our nephew, or to avoid being rude. Both my parents seem supportive of my desire not to be around my ex, but I guess only my dad truly agreed. On the day of the tea party, my mom told him she was preparing my favorite tea and sweets, but he couldn't stay because she wanted us to have some quality time together. My dad went to hang out with my uncle, thinking it was a nice gesture from my mom. He is now very angry. My husband made a strong effort with my sister when they first met, but now he just ignores her, believing she's mentally unwell. We don't know for sure if that's the case, but even so, there's no excuse for her behavior. My sister and my mom invited my ex and his mother because they thought it would help me confront the root of my issues with my sister, or at least that's their official story. We've moved into our new house, with my dad living in the guest house. We had many discussions, both in and out of therapy, and decided that while it's good for him to be with us, we all need our space. We're still renting out our old house, and we'll decide what to do with it later. My dad now has all the grandchildren together about 3 times a week, but he still sees my sister's son separately because she refuses to let him take the boy unless she knows where he lives. Given her behavior, we don't want her near us. My mom complained to her lawyer about how unfair it is that my dad gets to see all the grandchildren, but there's nothing she can do about it. A few weeks ago, my dad made a confession that made my stomach drop. He's been paying for my sister's son's schooling and babysitting costs, which is why she still allows him to see her son. He felt so guilty for hiding it from me and didn't want to keep any more secrets. I assured him that it was fine and asked him not to feel bad about it. On Mother's Day, my dad received an email with a link to an Instagram account where my mom and sister had posted a video about how much my mom has suffered because her family has abandoned her, and how my sister is a saint for sticking by her. It was pathetic, but I sent it to my lawyer. My dad officially filed for divorce in April, and the process is still ongoing. My mom insists he's wrong, but my dad said he'd rather drink bleach than go back to her. My brother and husband took my dad out for Father's Day, and they had a great time. My sister posted countless things on social media that day, but we managed to block my dad from seeing any of it because we wanted him to enjoy himself. They even did a camping trip with the kids. Basically, they went to a hotel, got a suite, and set up a tent in the middle of the room for the kids and a little teepee for the baby. My mom complained to the lawyers about how unfair it is that my dad still gets to see all the grandchildren, but there is nothing she can do about it. About a month ago, my dad told me he had a confession that made my stomach churn. He has been paying for my sister's son's schooling and babysitting costs, which is why she still allows him to see her son. He felt so guilty for hiding it from me and didn't want to keep any more secrets. I assured him it was okay and asked him not to feel bad about it. On Mother's Day, my dad got an email with a link to an Instagram account where my mom and sister had made a pathetic video about how much my mom has suffered because her family has abandoned her, and how my sister is a saint for sticking by her. It enraged me, but I just sent it to the lawyer. My dad officially filed for divorce in May, and the process is still ongoing. My mom insists he is wrong, but my dad said he would rather drink bleach than go back to her, so I think that's final. My brother and husband took my dad out for Father's Day, and they had a blast. My sister posted a ton of things that day, but they managed to block my dad from seeing any of it because we wanted him to enjoy it. They even did a camping trip with the kids. Basically, they went to a hotel, got a suite, and put a tent in the middle of the room for the kids and a little teepee for the baby. Honestly, having a baby is one of the best things that have ever happened to me, and seeing my husband be the amazing father I knew he would be makes me so happy. It's tiring, but we have so much support that I feel grateful beyond anything because I have my rocks by my side. My sisters-in-law and I now have a little calendar to share things that the kids can do together, all age appropriate. If they want to, they can participate, but we want to make sure they know they don't have to hang out with people they dislike and that their voices matter. Right now, they're all obsessed with the baby and see themselves as her protectors. We have little get-togethers, brunches, and so on, and honestly, spending time with family is now a pleasure instead of a headache without my sister around. I know it's wrong to say, but she just sucks the positivity out of the room. My mother-in-law also loves spending time with the baby and stays in the guest room about once a week. She asked politely and said she didn't want to take the baby for sleepovers or anything. I feel respected and heard by her. And yes, I break down sometimes because I miss my mom a lot. I miss the mom I had or thought I had. not the one who told me I would be a terrible mother or that I was a hateful woman. My therapist says this is a marathon, and I should focus on the good things. Speaking of good, Bates was fired. Not only that, but his reputation in his industry was ruined. His brother's reputation was also damaged, but because his brother isn't in a reputation-sensitive industry, he still has his job as far as I know. Bates sent me a 14-page, double-sided, single-spaced letter about how hurt he is that I'm denying him what's rightfully his, and how my husband is so threatened by him that he had to go and destroy him professionally because he couldn't destroy anything else. I say seems because I didn't read it. My lawyer did and gave me a summary. I've also heard from the grapevine. No, I don't ask people. They just tell me because they know he's stalking me, that the mother of his children moved away and he didn't care, saying it was for the best. This man doesn't even care about his kids and wants to play house with my baby and me. Sadly, he won't be homeless because his mom let him move back in with her, so I doubt he'll learn anything from this. Not the flashiest of updates, but that's what's happening. Oh, and my husband burned or donated every single item my mom or parents gave him, with my dad's blessing. He says life is too short to give her space in his life, even with memories. As the months passed, I thought I had finally put the worst behind me. The restraining order against Alex was in place, and security measures around the campus and my home had been tightened. I had even started seeing a therapist regularly to help process everything that had happened. My husband had taken our daughter to visit his parents for the weekend, giving me some much-needed time to unwind and catch up on work. The house felt eerily silent without the usual background noise of our daughter's laughter and the hum of daily life. I told myself that the solitude was a gift, a chance to recharge, but there was an unease I couldn't shake. It started as I was finishing some work in the living room. I was seated at the desk, surrounded by papers and my laptop, when I noticed the clock on the wall ticking louder than usual. I glanced at the time. It was just past midnight. I had been working longer than I realized. The house was dark except for the small desk lamp illuminating my workspace. I decided to call it a night, shutting down my computer and gathering the papers to put away. As I stood up, I heard it. A faint noise, almost imperceptible, coming from somewhere within the house. It was a soft thud, as if something had been knocked over. I froze, listening intently. My mind raced through possibilities, trying to rationalize what I had heard. The house was old. It could have been anything. The wind, the creaking of old floorboards, or even a stray animal outside. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I decided to investigate. Grabbing my phone, I turned on the flashlight and cautiously made my way toward the source of the sound. The hallway was dim, the only light coming from the small nightlight we kept on for our daughter. The shadows seemed to stretch and shift with each step I took, and the air felt heavy, as if it were pressing down on me. I reached the kitchen, where I thought the noise had come from. The room was empty, just as I had left it earlier. I sighed, telling myself I was being paranoid. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed in my hand, startling me. I glanced at the screen. It was a text message, but there was no name, just a number I didn't recognize. The message was short. "Miss me?" My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the screen, hoping I had read it wrong, but the words were there, clear as day. My fingers trembled as I typed a response. "Who is this?" I knew the answer, but I needed confirmation. The reply came almost instantly. "You know who." A cold wave of fear washed over me. It was Alex. How had he gotten my new number? I hadn't used this phone until after the restraining order was in place. Panic surged through me as I remembered the last time he had appeared out of nowhere, the way he had invaded my privacy, my life. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself to stay calm, to think rationally, but all I could think about was that he was back, and I was alone. I hurried back to the living room, locking the front door behind me. I was about to call the police when another text came through. "Look outside." My blood ran cold. I didn't want to look, but I knew I had to. Slowly, I walked to the window and peeked through the curtains. At first, I saw nothing, just the empty street and the faint glow of streetlights. But then, in the corner of the yard, partially hidden by the shadows, I saw a figure. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was Alex. He was standing completely still, just watching the house, watching me. He was too far away for me to see his expression, but I could feel his eyes on me, cold and calculating. How long had he been there? Had he been watching me all night? I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I needed to get out of the house, to get somewhere safe. But where? The nearest neighbors were too far away, and I didn't dare go outside with him there. My phone buzzed again. Another message. You can't hide forever. Desperation clawed at me. I couldn't let him win. Couldn't let him destroy the life I had fought so hard to rebuild. I knew what I had to do. I dialed 911, my hands shaking as I explained the situation to the dispatcher. They assured me that police were on their way, but every second felt like an eternity. I tried to keep my composure, but fear was gnawing at me, threatening to overwhelm me. I checked the window again. He was still there, but this time he had moved closer, standing at the edge of the driveway. I could see him more clearly now, the way he was dressed in dark clothing, blending into the night. He looked like a shadow, a specter from a nightmare that I couldn't escape. The minutes dragged on. I kept checking the window, praying for the sound of sirens, for any sign that help was coming. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard the faint wail of police sirens in the distance. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. As the sirens grew louder, Alex turned and began to walk away, disappearing into the darkness. I watched him go, a mix of fear and anger boiling inside me. The police arrived moments later, but by then, he was long gone. They searched the area, took my statement, and promised to increase patrols in the neighborhood. But I knew it wasn't enough. He was out there, somewhere, and he would be back. My parents are officially divorced now, after many fights and tantrums from my mom. She kept the house and got a lump sum of money, but that's it. My dad is like a new man, and we're all so happy for him. Here's a little throwback. When all the drama went down, we didn't fire our housekeeper. She's been with my husband's family for decades, and I was stressed about her being out of work because of my crazy family. We're not slobs, and she's not scrubbing floors on her knees or anything. My dad spoke with her and told her she was on paid vacation until we found a new house. He assured her she wasn't fired, and she was so relieved. So was her family. My dad started getting food and other things from them from time to time because they were so grateful. Well, it turns out that our housekeeper has a sister who owns a nail salon, and my dad is now dating her. She's a lovely woman with grown children, so she understands the dynamics at play. My dad has been clear that he's not moving in with her or getting married, and she's pleased with that because she values her independence. My mom nearly had a meltdown when she heard about his new relationship. She claimed it was a late midlife crisis and accused him of being a sugar daddy. This is what I've heard, of course, because I don't have any contact with her, but from what I know, she's struggling. She was never good at budgeting and relied on my dad to curb her spending, so she's had to cut back on ridiculous purchases. My sister is also struggling because my dad isn't helping her financially anymore. My nephew started calling my daughter an affair baby and said she wasn't with her real dad. He called my other nephews delusional, and during a birthday party, he even pushed one of my husband's nephews, saying they weren't really cousins, only he was. The kids were confused but told an adult right away. My dad tried to talk to him, but he kept repeating it. He spoke with my sister, and she said she couldn't stop her son from telling the truth. My dad told her that until there's a change, he's cutting them off. She panicked and cried, but is also incredibly stubborn. So now my nephew goes to public school because my husband convinced my dad to stop financially supporting them. As for Bates, he's still unemployed. I know I was vague about his job, but he worked in an industry related to helping vulnerable women, with some ties to stalking issues. Ironic, right? That's why he was fired. The organization didn't want his reputation tarnishing theirs. I've received 2 more long, handwritten letters from him, which he sends to my lawyer because he only has my lawyer's address. I love my lawyer. He's a champ for dealing with this nonsense. In terms of gossip, there hasn't been much, except for one incident at the grocery store. A random woman approached me and asked if my child was Bates's baby. I was shocked and asked her what she was talking about. She said he had a photo of us on his profile and that I should be ashamed of myself for hurting such a good man. I was speechless. This wasn't a public photo. It was one I sent to a family group once. I told my husband right away, and he was furious but kept his composure. We decided to smoke out the leak. Long story short, it was my dad's 2 sisters who were feeding information to my mom. My dad was devastated but didn't hesitate to cut them off. They're still begging him to talk to them again, but he's firm in his decision. My brother and his family are doing great. We see them often and have gone on several family vacations since the last update. There are also no contact with my mom and sister. My sister-in-law is actually relieved because it turns out she was never a fan of our mom but kept the peace for the family's sake. My in-laws are wonderful as always. We now allow my mother-in-law to babysit overnight, and she's thrilled. Sometimes she has all her grandchildren under one roof, and they love being with her. She used to be a flight attendant, so their favorite game is to pretend they're on an airplane with her. Overall, they adore her. and we trust her completely with our kids. She had to make her social media profiles private because my mom kept stalking her. I'm sure my mom is extremely jealous, but she made her bed. Lastly, my husband keeps me grounded whenever anything comes up. We're thinking about having another baby, or maybe adopting one, but we haven't decided yet. We're fortunate to have such a strong support system and the privilege to have these discussions. I still miss my mom terribly. I cry when I think about the milestones I can't share with her anymore. But she's not the person I thought she was, and my family's safety comes first. As a fun fact, my husband and brother actually did go camping for Father's Day. They had a great time except for the mosquito bites and some unfortunate sunburns.